Can you help me with the thingy?
Yeah.
I already started it, so. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. If people start to filter in, they can just sit down as they need. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Colleen Donovan. Some people call me Lena. I'll be the one giving the presentation today. In regards to your packets, you will see that you have a newsletter that contains stuff for the next talk as well, for the sign up for that. You also have a little piece of paper, including a sign up if you want to do that while you're here. I know some people like to do that. And we're doing something a little bit different this time. Usually we take questions as time goes along. I'm just going to ask if you can refrain and hold your questions till the end. We've had some feedback from people that it's been very distracting to continue to take long questions during the talks. Does everyone have everything that they might need? Your packets, pens, water? Everyone needs water? Everyone good? All right. So for our agenda for today, we're going to talk about what is stress and how exactly does stress affect us. We're going to talk about acute versus chronic stress and how that has changes to your body. We're going to talk about inflammation and the gut-brain connection as it relates to stress. And then we're going to show you how exactly do you address stress. So first, just to get the definition out of the way, stress is a natural response to the demands of life. And this can be caused by a variety of factors. It can be things like work, relationship, finances, health. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something negative that's causing stress, but it's just something that happens when you need to rise to the occasion. And it is your body's way of responding to that challenge or threat, whether it's real or perceived. So it could be an internal stress. It could be something you're worrying about. It could be something external, like you have a big project for work, but it is your body's way of saying, okay, I have this task, this challenge in front of me, and I need to rise to the occasion. And in small amounts, stress is helpful. Stress is good for you. It motivates you. It helps you to meet those challenges. But when stress is chronic or overwhelming, then it can become negative on your health and well-being. And a good way to look at that, this is called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. And what you're looking at here is you can see performance on the y-axis and then the amount of stress or arousal, as they call it, on the x-axis. And when you have very low amounts of stress or perhaps no stress about something at all, you're actually not going to perform that well. You're not motivated. It's not that important to you, or you don't have necessarily the drive at that time, so you might do the task, but you might not perform it as well as you could. However, if something does mean quite a bit to you, and you're motivated to do well, then that's more of what they call the optimum stress. You have the stress to do something really well, and your ability to perform goes up. But as the stress increases, or perhaps it's gone on for too long, it impairs your ability to do well. So you have kind of this sweet spot of the optimal amount of stress, and then you have it on either side where you can have too much or too little, and you won't be able to perform. But some stress is actually beneficial for you. So another thing I want to get out of the way is it stress or is it anxiety? Now, I've used the phrase anxiety in terms of the title of this talk, and I'll use it throughout, but what I'm talking about is not a diagnosed anxiety, such as generalized anxiety disorder. What I'm going to be talking about is the anxious feelings that arise as a result of stress itself. And stress and anxiety, an actual anxiety condition, are extremely similar in terms of the reactions that they pull out of your body. And so it's important to talk about it as well, but I won't be giving guidelines on how to deal with a diagnosable anxiety disorder. So stress is usually a response to an external cause, such as meeting a deadline, arguing with a friend, and it typically goes away once the situation is resolved. Not always, as we'll see, but that's a normal response, and it can be positive or negative, as I had mentioned. However, anxiety is usually an internal reaction to the stressor. So you have to have the stress first before you can have anxiety. And this involves persistent feelings of apprehension and dread, and they do not go away. It doesn't matter if the stressor is removed. It doesn't matter if the circumstances improved. You still feel this anxious feeling all the time. And there might not be an immediate threat to you. There might not even be anything that you realize to be anxious about. So that is anxiety. But where they overlap is that they both affect your mind and body, and they have extremely similar symptoms. You can have excessive worrying, uneasiness, tension, headaches, body pain, high blood pressure, loss of sleep. So they're very similar, as I said. They have a lot of overlap, but when I talk about anxiety and anxious behaviors in this talk, I'm referring to the behaviors themselves and not a diagnosable disorder. So in terms of when your body is stressed, you have two essential states. You have fight or flight, and you have rest and digest. Fight or flight is what we associate with stress, and rest and digest is what we associate with being relaxed. So fight or flight also goes by the name of the sympathetic nervous system, which is what is activated during fight or flight. This is an automatic response. We don't necessarily have any control over it. And what happens is your heart rate increases, your pupils will dilate, your blood is directed to your extremities, your senses heighten, your focus will narrow on whatever it is, your digestion will temporarily shut down. Digesting your food is not a priority when you are stressed out. And a hormone that is your stress hormone, cortisol, is released, getting you ready to either run or fight. Now, so this is what is occurring when you have a challenge that you need to rise to. Your body is getting ready and saying, okay, I need to mobilize my stores, I need to increase my performance, and I need to address this challenge that is directly in front of me. But when you're not going through that, when you're able to relax, it'll activate your parasympathetic nervous system, or the rest and digest response. And then once this stressful event is gone and no longer applicable, you'll see that your heart rate and blood pressure will decrease, your pupils will constrict, your digestion will increase, you'll be able to digest food again, you'll have a normal digestive response, you might feel hungry again, and you'll be able to feel calmer and a much broader set of focus. So these both are very important when it comes to day-to-day life, and they're supposed to balance each other. So going a little further into what actually occurs when you're stressed out, when you're going through this response, your body will trigger a cascade inside of you to be able to handle the stress. The cascade is meant to mobilize your energy. You have energy stored within you, we all do, and it prioritizes mobilizing that energy over some normal functions of the body that we associate with rest and digest, such as the digestive response. So what's actually occurring is when your brain perceives stress, it releases some hormones that go to your adrenal gland. We call this the HPA axis. It stands for the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. Sorry about that. And this is the common stress cascade that we talk about. Your hypothalamus triggers your pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which triggers your adrenal glands to release stress hormones, particularly cortisol and adrenaline. Now, when cortisol and adrenaline are released and they go into your bloodstream, these are the hormones that help you to mobilize this energy. They help your liver convert its stored energy to glucose, to sugar, so that you have extra sugar in your blood to provide you with the energy. Those hormones increase your blood pressure, they'll increase your sweating, they'll increase your breathing, your heart rate, they'll help you to focus your vision, and as we've talked about before, your digestion will slow down. So these are all normal, these are all things that occur when your body is stressed out. But the difference between it is whether this is happening to you acutely or whether it's happening to you chronically. So if a stressor is introduced, you have a deadline, you're worrying about, your kid's performance in school, or you have a family matter that's going on, those coping mechanisms that we saw in the previous slide will be released. You'll see your increased heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, adrenaline. Your immune strength will temporarily go up. If this is acute or short term, the stress will resolve, your coping mechanisms will decrease, and you'll go back to your normal baseline. But the problem here is when this happens for too long, when it happens chronically. And when it occurs chronically, those coping mechanisms, which are meant to be short-term, will continue. They'll increase inflammation, they'll cause immune dysfunction, they'll increase your risk of anxiety, depression, and cardiovascular disease. And looking further into the impact of the chronic fight or flight response, you'll see a chronic increase in blood pressure, chronic release of stress hormones, your blood actually gets a little more sticky when you are stressed out. This is an increase of platelets being released. It is your body saying, I am stressed, I am in danger, I am about to be wounded, and it is increasing your body's ability to clot based on that. Your digestive system, its functions decrease. It's not a priority. Your immune system during chronic stress also goes down. You get a temporary boost in the beginning, but then it very quickly starts to plummet. And your growth and sex hormones are no longer considered a priority. And some of the consequences of this can be heart disease, ulcers, anxiety, irritability, insomnia, weight gain, infections, cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and premature aging. So chronic stress is very detrimental to your body in the long term. And then just to look even more closely at that, if you look at your central nervous system at the beginning, at the top of your brain, your stress starts the fight or flight response. Your body preps your immune system. You're getting ready. When you become stressed, it affects your respiratory and your cardiovascular systems. As we've seen, your lungs get ready, your heart gets ready. But as you can see in the cardiovascular system, it increases your body's ability to clot. It increases your blood pressure. This can damage your cardiovascular system. This can cause some long-term damage. In terms of your reproductive system, I mentioned that those sex hormones are not a priority during stress. Releasing growth hormones are not a priority during stress. And some sex hormones can actually be sacrificed in terms for your body to release its own stress hormones. So reproduction, the ability to reproduce can go down. It can lead to issues with that in both male and female. It can lead to digestive issues with your digestive system being kind of chronically put on a back burner here. So it can lead to heartburn, nausea, indigestion, stomach ache. Your endocrine system, when we talked about your body mobilizing your energy stores from your liver, the glucose, it's constantly releasing extra glucose into your bloodstream. And that can predispose you to developing diabetes. You have this constant response of releasing extra glucose, and your body's not meant to handle that long term. And then in terms of your musculoskeletal system, stress and pain frequently go hand in hand. When you're stressed, your body tenses up, it increases inflammation, and it can flare up old injuries. So this is just an entire body-wide issue in terms of stress. It's not just mental, it affects pretty much all of you. And something that I find frequently distresses some people is, why does stress affect some more than others? You've gone through a stressful occasion. Someone else may have gone through the exact same stressful occasion, but somehow they're able to handle it better than you. And it can lead people to feel like that they're not coping well enough or they're not responding well enough. So let's address that. So one of the theories behind this is what they call the diathesis stress model. Now, diathesis merely means a predisposing factor. It is an innate vulnerability to stress's effects. These can be things like genetics, early life trauma, or certain medical conditions. And then the stress part of this is the triggering event. You have the predisposition, you need the trigger. This can be acute or severe, such as trauma, death, divorce, and it can be chronic or ongoing. So relationship problems, chronic medical issues, chronic financial instability. And a really good diagram of this, on your y-axis, here you can see the amount of stress, and then on the x-axis you can see the level of predisposition for the disorder. If you have a very low predisposition, the amount of stress, it's pretty much never going to cause a stress-related disorder in you. If you have that low predisposition, and this isn't anything that you're necessarily doing. In many cases, it's just genetics or something that you're born with, or something that occurs such as acquiring a medical condition. So for those people who have a low vulnerability, they can experience a lot of stress and not see it. And then as you continue to go down for the predisposition, it can take much less stress to develop a disorder. And for some people, they might be just at the tip. They might have been doing really, really, really well for so long, and then suddenly they're not able to cope with it as well anymore. So this is why stress affects people differently. Everyone is different in this regard. Everyone is not the same. And it's important to realize where your boundaries lie and so that you can deal with your stress on a personal level. So one of the key factors to understanding stress is actually your gut. it surprises a lot of people. They don't necessarily think about this, your gut and your brain as being that intertwined, besides the fact that they're within the same body. But if you think about it, you already know that when you're stressed and anxious, that it affects your gut. You get butterflies, you get a sinking feeling, you feel that churning in your belly when you're anxious, when you're stressed out. So you already know your brain affects your gut. You've experienced it all along. But what you might not know is that that relationship goes both ways. What your gut does affects your brain, and it affects your mood, such as stress and anxiety. So an upset gastrointestinal tract can be the cause or the product of stress and anxiety. It can either be a result of you feeling anxious, or it can be the cause of you feeling anxious. One of the causes for this can be what they call dysbiosis. That's just a fancy term for you have an imbalance of bacteria in your gut. Inside of your gastrointestinal tract, you have trillions of bacteria that live inside you. They help you do things like digest, they help keep your gastrointestinal tract healthy, but there are good bacteria and there are bad bacteria. And dysbiosis means there's too much bad bacteria than is supposed to be in there and not enough good bacteria. It can also be the result of an inflamed or a leaky gut, so you have actual intestinal damage. And these all send SOS signals to your brain saying that this is wrong, this is not right, and your brain will respond accordingly by exhibiting a stress response. Your mood, of course, impacts your gut, as I said. And stress, as I've mentioned a few times at this point, very much puts your digestion on a back burner. And this can cause significant gastrointestinal issues for people who are chronically under stress, who are chronically anxious. They go hand in hand. It's really not common to see one without the other. One of the more recent and interesting hypotheses is the idea of a leaky gut equals a leaky brain. So when we say a leaky gut, what we're talking about is you have a protective layer on the inside of your intestines that is where all of your food passes over. It's where everything that you consume that goes into your mouth and goes through your GI tract basically rubs against. And that layer protects your bloodstream, your insides from various things that go throughout your gastrointestinal tract. But the problem is that that protective barrier can become damaged over time. This can happen from various medications or bad bacteria. It can happen through stress. Stress is actually a huge factor when it comes to damaging the inside of your gut. It can happen through various toxins you might ingest, and it can happen from various food particles or foods. There are certain foods that they call pro-inflammatory that can cause damage to the inside of your gut. This is usually a chronic, long-term thing that occurs, not after just ingesting it once. And the standard American diet is a huge factor in triggering leaky gut. The amount of high-fat foods, the high sugars, these can all trigger this damage, and it is heavily associated with the development of stress and anxiety afterwards. And the protective barrier doesn't apply to just your gut. Your brain has one too. Your brain is so incredibly important. So it has a barrier to try to keep stuff out of it that should not belong in your brain, and they call this the blood-brain barrier. Now, when you have leaky gut and things are leaking out into your bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there, it triggers this widespread immune response, systemic low-grade inflammation, basically. And when that occurs next to the blood-brain barrier, it can actually trigger that same leakiness in the blood-brain barrier. Things that are not supposed to cross do cross. And that's not good for it. Your brain doesn't like that, and that puts it in significant distress, and that itself can trigger stress and anxiety. So you may have noticed, as I've been talking about this, that inflammation is a bit of a recurring theme. I keep talking about inflammation of your gut, systemic inflammation, inflammation leading to cardiovascular disease, that this is something huge when it comes to stress. And it really is. There is an abundance of research to show that inflammation is so key when it comes to managing not only stress, but other psychiatric disorders as well. Depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Inflammation is absolutely huge. And I have just the one study listed here, but if you ever care to look, you will find hundreds of the research linking inflammation to stress and anxiety. It is a massive connection, and it bears, talking about. So as a result of this chronic stress and as a result of this inflammation that accompanies it, it changes your brain. We talked about things being able to cross your blood-brain barrier, but it goes further than that. Parts that are responsible for your memory and for higher order thinking actually shrink. The prefrontal cortex, which is this front section of your brain, this is where we think that most of your higher order thinking comes from, such as planning something out, making lists, thinking about a problem. That's all your prefrontal cortex. And when you're exposed to chronic stress, it can actually atrophy. And then your hippocampus, which is just the part of the brain that is incredibly important for memory, also shrinks. This is one of the reasons why when people are stressed and anxious, they might have problems deciding what to do. They'll feel overwhelmed. They feel like they can't handle their tasks. And they may also feel like they can't remember things as well as they should. Well, it's literally affecting your brain. Areas responsible for fear and emotion can become chronically activated. So you have the center of your brain, they call it the fear center, is the amygdala. And this can become overactivated, over-responsive, triggering to more anxiety, more fear. And in the initial stages, that section of your brain can actually get a little bit bigger because it's so active, but then it almost becomes worn down and it'll shrink. And then the functions that help your brain grow and repair are reduced. Our brain releases certain factors that help repair your brain, that help to repair things that are going on, to maintain your brain, and those don't work as well when you're under chronic stress. So not only do you have this damage going on, but your ability to fix it might be reduced. And altogether, this leads into what I call the stress spiral. So once the risk factors are set in, once the process begins, it can begin this spiral downward that can be so incredibly difficult to get out of. So you start off with chronic stress, trauma, stressful event, whatever that may be. It triggers this low-grade inflammation. It triggers issues with the gut and with the brain. The distressed gut and brain get damaged, contribute to even more inflammation and more stress and anxiety. And it will continue to feed back into itself. And a part of this spiral can even include coping behaviors that accidentally contribute to the spiral. For example, consuming comfort foods. Foods high in fat and sugar actually trigger inflammation and increase stress. Now, an important thing to note is they don't do this in the short term. When you're consuming the food and it's giving you that feeling of comfort, it's not doing that in the immediate. What it actually is doing is causing you to have an increase in pleasure, an increase of dopamine, as well as releasing our own form of opiates inside of our body, endogenous opiates. So you actually get kind of a little bit of a high from it. So this is why comfort foods can be so important to some people, but in the long term, they're really not good for your stress response. And additionally, if you're feeling super stressed out, you might want to conserve your energy. You might feel overwhelmed. You don't want to be as active, but being sedentary can also contribute to your stress. So it's a difficult spiral to get out of once it gets triggered. So now that I've depressed you all probably absolutely completely about this, how do you address it? How do you work with this? The first thing you want to do is lifestyle. You want to try to address some of this stress at the root cause. You can do so many different things in terms of trying to cope, but if you're actually able to remove or reduce the stressor that's affecting you, well, why not do that first? You can get mental support, which will provide you with the tools needed to handle the stress. There are various aspects of your diet that you can do to reduce this chronic inflammation I've talked about, and also give your body the building blocks needed to erect a strong stress defense. What we consume are building blocks for our body, and part of what we consume as food gets turned into building blocks for us being able to handle stress. And then lastly, supplements. Getting some nutrients can be incredibly difficult when you're trying to get them from diet alone. Vitamin D is a famous example of this. And also you can get some short-term stress relief from various supplements while you're giving your body its time to heal. So let's start with lifestyle. As I said, reduce stressors wherever possible, wherever you can. This can include things like helping yourself with time management and using tools to stay organized and prevent feeling overwhelmed. I had talked about the fact that your ability to do higher order thinking may be diminished when you're chronically stressed out. And so relying on things that can help you, tools that can help keep you organized, helping yourself make lists or use extra calendars, even if this is something you think, okay, well, I've never had to do this before, why do I need it now? It's because you need a little extra help. Be kind to yourself and allow yourself to get the help that it needs. And don't get caught up in exhaustion Olympics. This is something I see all the time, that people feel at times if they're not miserable, then somehow they're not being successful. And they'll think, oh, well, I need to work X amount of hours in order to be successful. And it's not even necessarily about the money that they're getting, but it's about, they have this feeling that if you're not working hard and driving yourself into the ground, then even what are you? Like, how are you relevant? And it's important not to get caught up in that, not to, if someone says, I got X amount of hours of sleep, oh, well, I got less, or, oh, I worked more. Don't get caught up in it. There's no award for, getting less sleep than somebody else. There's no award for staying up. It's not worth it. It's never worth it. Take time for your hobbies. Invest in what you like to do. That's another thing that when people get so caught up about, I need to go, they don't take time for themselves. They don't take time for what actually matters to them. Additionally, frequently, spending time with friends, family, community often goes by the wayside when you are chronically stressed. But fostering those friendships, relationships can be incredibly important when you're trying to relieve your stress. Spending time with people who will support you, who will look out for you, is so important. And then take breaks. Take time, listen to some music, get some time in nature, make sure you get plenty of sleep. As I said, there's no reward for making yourself miserable. So give your body what it needs, try to listen to it, and take breaks when you need them. In terms of exercise is incredibly important when it comes to stress relief. It releases stress-relieving endorphins when you exercise. It can act as a form of meditation, so it can help you forget about what's going on when you're focusing on whatever exercise it is that you're doing, and it can help boost your mood. And in terms of types of exercise, anything that's fun and gets you moving. Exercise does not have to be miserable. Exercise does not have to be a chore. If it's playing outside with your kids, doing basketball for an hour 3 times a week, then fine, that's it. If it's running on the beach, fine, then that's it for you. But don't get caught up with trying to choose the perfect exercise. Just whatever, if it's getting you moving more than you would before, then it is in the correct direction. So some lifestyle resources that you can use to kind of help to provide tools for some of the things that I mentioned. You can use free calendar apps to help keep yourself organized. It's got to-do lists, it's got reminders, it's got schedules. You can use something like Google Calendar, it's free. There are also apps that help you keep tidy in various aspects of your life. For example, there are apps that help you kind of schedule when you need to clean. And I actually use this one myself. That's why it's up there. I forget sometimes until I look at something and I go, oh my gosh, that is so incredibly dirty. Because I get so distracted and I don't have the brain space to necessarily keep track. But I have something that helps me to keep track so that I don't have to feel anxious about it. I know when it's time to do something. There's also lots of free resources, such as free YouTube workouts. This one, Yoga with Adrienne, is one of the most popular ones out there. She has lots of free stuff, all factored for beginners. And then also, something I didn't even know about until very recently, in Concord, the Concord Trails Committee has guided hikes around Concord. So once a month, they get together, I believe it's usually on a Saturday, and they'll take you around the trails in Concord. They're good for beginners. They're good for people who don't even know anything about hiking. So if you want to get out in nature, if you want to get out and spend some time with people, but you're not entirely sure how, this can be a really good resource for you. So the next thing that you'll want to focus on is giving yourself the mental support needed to deal with stress. And one of the things that can be incredibly useful for this is a practice called mindfulness. It's a type of meditation, or even just paying attention to how you're experiencing and feeling moments in a non-judgmental way. So you recognize what you feel without forcing yourself to change it. So if you are feeling stressed, if you are feeling overwhelmed, it's giving you an opportunity to kind of step back and go, okay, yes, I am feeling stressed and overwhelmed. I'm not going to ignore this, but I'm not going to judge it. I'm just going to accept this is what is happening to my body at this time. Sometimes taking that step back allows you to better understand not only what you're feeling, but what might have triggered it. It's like, okay, I'm suddenly feeling stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. Okay, it's not a bad thing. I'm not going to judge myself for feeling this way. But maybe I can figure out what caused it. Did something trigger this? Something I didn't even realize? And it can really help you to better understand how you might react to things, where your thresholds are in terms of handling it, and help to reduce your stress in the moment by giving yourself that permission to feel the stress, to not look down on yourself for that. And then the other side of this is therapy, whether self or with a therapist. In terms of self techniques, these can include things like cognitive restructuring. There are lots of free resources where you can have worksheets for people to help you work through looking at something differently. You cannot always remove a stressor. It's, for a lot of people, that's just not possible. If it's a financial issue or if it's a relationship issue, you can't just cut off whatever's going on. But what you can do is you can get some help at looking at it in a different way and getting some help changing either your perspective or giving you techniques and tools to deal with the stressor within that situation. You can also do things like controlled breathing. It doesn't necessarily sound like a self-therapy technique, but it's listed amongst them. And some people find that that really helps them to control their stress exactly in the moment. But beyond that, you can go to work with an actual therapist, and they can provide you with many of the tools needed to manage your anxiety and restructure how you think and restructure your current coping mechanisms to something that's more beneficial for you at that time. It's not uncommon that you may have gone through something stressful in the past and you developed certain coping mechanisms that worked in that context. But then when something stressful happens to you again and you try to employ those same coping mechanisms, they're not necessarily going to be beneficial and they can sometimes be harmful. So it can be important to work with somebody to figure out, okay, well, what will work with you in that time? And people going to therapy is very common. It's not ever something to be looked down about. There's a huge stigma attached to seeking help for mental health, and I really wish that there wasn't. I've been to therapy myself. So if you ever feel like you need an external help, please seek it out. One of the examples of what a therapist can go through with you is cognitive behavioral therapy. This is considered a bit of the gold standard when working with stress. And it is a way that they will help you to rethink what you're going through and to not necessarily view it in either such a negative way or to give yourself, kind of similar to the mindfulness, give yourself permission to feel that way, but realize that you may not always feel that way. So in terms of some mental support resources that you can access, there are certain guided meditation apps. Headspace is by far the most popular I've ever seen. I've used it myself. I believe they have a free version and a paid version, but you should be able to get by just fine with the free version. There are also cognitive restructuring how-tos through the American Psychiatric Association, so the APA. And then there are local counseling centers. One of the biggest ones in Concord is Riverbend. Pretty much one of the only ones in Concord that I know of. And then there's also Pastoral Counseling Center if you're more towards southern New Hampshire. They're located in Manchester. They came highly recommended to me by one of my psychology professors at the University of New Hampshire, and I used them myself and found them to be a great resource. So next up is diet. So we've dealt with things you can do for your lifestyle, things you can do to support mentally, but there are obviously physiological things as well that are going on that diet can help manage. And some of those would be stress-relieving foods. Fruits and vegetables, any fruits and vegetables, frozen is fine. Some people get really kind of caught up with, oh, it has to be fresh, it has to be fresh. If frozen is how you can get your fruits and veggies in, then frozen it is. Just so long as you're including them. And fruits and vegetables can be huge in terms of relieving your stress. They provide you with fiber, they provide you with vitamins, they provide you with minerals that your body needs in order to cope with stress. Foods high in fiber, in general, are great for helping you with stress. And a good way to view at getting them in are what are called your 5 Bs. So this includes beans, brown rice, berries, bran, and baked potato. You can use the baked potato in moderation, but we can go to town on the rest. And then also flaxseed is very high in fiber. It also contains other anti-inflammatory compounds that can be very beneficial for stress. Foods high in omega-3s. Omega-3s are an essential fatty acid, usually found in things like fish, also found in flax and chia seeds, and they are things that we need to consume. We cannot make them. So we have to get them in our diet. Most people do not get enough, and a consequence of not getting enough is stress and anxiety. So foods that are really high in omega-3s will include your oily fishes, so things like salmon, your flax, and your chia seeds. You can also take a supplement. Some people find it really hard to get enough into their diet. Fermented foods are huge when it comes to managing stress. I talked about your good friendly bacteria that reside inside of your gut. Those good bacteria can actually consume some of the fibers that we cannot digest. And when they consume that, they release compounds that help us to deal with stress, that will reduce inflammation. So when they talk about fermentable fibers and your friendly flora, that's actually what they're discussing, is that you consume these fibers that your good bacteria can eat and then make these beneficial compounds to help you cope with anxiety, to help your brain to function the way it's supposed to. And so where you can get some fermented foods can include things like unsweetened yogurt, miso. Some people also use like kombucha or tempeh. And then green tea. Green tea is a fabulous stress reliever. It contains some anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, as well as a compound called L-theanine, all of which can go very far in terms of helping to relieve stress and anxiety. And unfortunately, when we're talking diet, we also have to address foods to limit. I had mentioned that the standard American diet can be not that great in terms of causing inflammation, causing damage to your gut, and actually triggering stress and anxiety. So you'll want to limit high glycemic index carbs. Now, when I say high glycemic index, what I'm referring to is how quickly your body breaks that particular food down into sugar. Basically, how soon after you consume something does it give you a blood sugar spike, and how strong is that spike? So, for example, if you consume something like beans, which does have carbohydrates in it, compared to a Coke, the Coke is going to spike your blood sugar fast, and it's going to spike it hard. But what happens is that when it spikes fast and hard, it dips down, and it actually, once it dips down further than normal baseline, it can induce an even further stress response. You might feel anxiety, you might feel like you have low blood sugar, you'll feel shaky, you'll feel tired. And so trying to maintain a lower glycemic index diet overall can be very beneficial. This doesn't necessarily mean avoiding high glycemic index carbs. These can be things like, white bread, which people consume on a regular basis. But you can mitigate it by ensuring that you're consuming other foods along with it, that you're consuming protein, that you're consuming healthy fats, and that can help to regulate that blood sugar spike and reduce that stress on your body. So if you ever turn to something very sweet and then find yourself feeling like garbage later, that's one of the reasons why. Consuming too much saturated fat, or more than 10% of your daily calories from saturated fat. Saturated fat actually acts as an inflammation signal inside of your body. It binds to a similar receptor that toxins can bind to, and it triggers an inflammation cascade directly from saturated fat itself. So it's not bad for you in moderation, just don't eat too much of it. So this would be limiting things like fried foods, very fatty foods, copious amounts of red meat, things like that. You'll want to limit alcohol. That can be hard when it comes to stress. You might feel like you need to turn to something, but alcohol is also a stressor on your body. Your body works very hard to clear it out and to not deal with it, and it's better off just to not to ingest it if you're struggling with chronic stress and anxiety. Artificial sweeteners. This can surprise a lot of people. Artificial sweeteners, while we don't get any calories from them, they are considered a no-calorie sweetener, they do negatively affect our gut bacteria. They're not entirely certain what's going on in that for the research, but it is pretty clear that the changes that occur inside of your friendly gut flora are not for the benefit. And it's if you're struggling with this, it's just better off to avoid something that will harm them. Excessive caffeine. We've all experienced the caffeine jitters when you've had too much and you suddenly feel like your skin is buzzing or what have you. Excessive caffeine triggers feelings of anxiety in a great number of people. So you'll want to limit it maybe to just like 1 cup of coffee if you can tolerate that, or limiting it, or just getting rid of it altogether if you still find that it gives you those feelings of anxiety. So paying attention to how caffeine makes you feel can help you cope with this. And then try eliminating gluten. The amount of people who are non-celiac gluten sensitive and experience stress and stress-related disorders, the overlap is surprisingly high. And this applies to other mental disorders as well. Now, avoiding gluten is becoming one of the foremost medical nutrition therapies when it comes to dealing with mental health issues. So it could be worth a shot. One of the reasons you might be sensitive to gluten if you're having stress is because when you have that barrier breaking down inside of your gut, the leaky gut, gluten proteins can actually leak through into your bloodstream, and your body recognizes it as something foreign, something that's not supposed to be there, and it'll attack it. And so the next time when you eat something with gluten, it recognizes it as being that foreign pathogen and might decide to attack it as well. So for some, eliminating gluten goes a very long way in terms of helping them to mitigate their stress and anxiety. So some really good nutrition resources. I only barely touched on, how to eat healthy in terms of addressing with stress and anxiety. But some of the places where you can find some are Hannaford's has free food classes. They'll do things like show you how to read nutrition labels, how to shop on a budget, how to pick foods for a heart-healthy diet. And these are all free and taught by a dietitian that they have hired at Hannaford's. So these are available to anybody. Anybody can go and join, watch. Sometimes they'll take you around tours of the grocery store to give you a better idea of how to pick healthy foods. So that's a great resource. You can also find healthy recipes in terms of choosing anti-inflammatory recipes that aren't too high in sugar or in saturated fat. And a good place to start is places like nutritionfacts.org. Harvard has a place where they publish their own recipes as a part of their public health. And then eatright.org, which is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They also publish recipes that you can begin. Now, there are lots of places you can go. These are just some of the places that I start with when I'm looking to try something new. And if you're a bookworm like me and you like expanding knowledge all the time and you want to learn more about this, go more in depth, perhaps look at it from a different perspective, there's a book, This Is Your Brain on Food, taught by Uma Nadu. She is a medical doctor practicing out of, I believe, Massachusetts General. She's a professor at Harvard. She is also one of 3 nutritional psychiatrists in the entire country. Very much a trailblazer, and her book on how food affects your mental health beyond stress and anxiety, but also for things like OCD, ADHD, is very fascinating. And then there's another book called How Not to Diet, also written by the same man who wrote How Not to Die. How Not to Diet is very in-depth in terms of how you react to food, how foods affect you, why our food system is the way it is, how do you live longer. It's incredibly researched. I don't necessarily agree with all of his conclusions, particularly his conclusion regarding that most people should be vegetarian. However, you cannot deny that his research is sound, and it is a kind of a great manual for anybody who's just looking to better understand their food and their health. So lastly, in terms of what you can do to help you manage your stress are supplements. Supplements can be either as essential nutrients, and when I say essential, I mean something you have to get from your diet. You can't make it. If you don't consume it, you will become deficient. So first up is tryptophan. Lots of people have probably heard of this around the Thanksgiving dinner table when they talk about tryptophan being in your turkey and being responsible for the food coma afterwards. And tryptophan is incredibly important when it comes to your mood. It is actually the precursor to serotonin. So the feel-good chemical that we associate with things like when it's too low, we associate it with depression. Tryptophan is the precursor. And the reason why I suggest this as a supplement, as opposed to trying to consume more foods with it, is that tryptophan, it is an amino acid, meaning it's a part of proteins, but as amino acids go, it's very large, it's big. And it has issues crossing that blood-brain barrier that I talked about to get to your brain, to the parts where serotonin is important, because other amino acids will compete with it, and they'll inhibit its ability to get to where it needs to go. So this is why I recommend it as a supplement instead of increasing food sources, because it's much better as a supplement than trying to get it when other things might be crowding out its ability to do its job. Vitamin D. Vitamin D has become a bit of a hero, especially over the pandemic, when everybody realizing how important it is in terms of your immune system, but it's also incredibly helpful for mood. Vitamin D actually protects your brain tissue. It protects the nerves that are responsible for your mental health, and it decreases inflammation. Omega-3 fish oil, I had mentioned not everyone can get omega-3s in their diet. It can be hard for some people to eat fish, a certain amount of times a week. And so supplementing it in this regard can be a great idea. And as I mentioned, omega-3s are, really key in terms of reducing inflammation. If you're not getting enough of them, you're going to be experiencing more inflammation. You're going to be more stressed out. Magnesium is a mineral that is very important for your body in terms of relaxation. Magnesium is actually usually prescribed for things like headaches, also muscle cramps, because it helps to tamp down those overactive responses. Additionally, 68% of Americans don't get enough magnesium in their diet. It can be difficult for a lot of people to get this in their diet. So supplementing might be key, and it goes so far in terms of easing the stress response. A lot of people actually take it at night because they find it helps them sleep, it helps them relax. And then probiotics. These are basically taking in a pill form those friendly gut bacteria that I've been talking about. These help to regulate the communication between your gut and your brain. They reduce inflammation. They go even further than that. They maintain your gut integrity. They are responsible for producing neurotransmitters. I mean, your friendly flora are really your best friends. And sometimes our diet can contribute to killing off some of the good bacteria, and so replenishing them can be really important. There are also some herbals that you can use, so beyond nutrients. These can include things like turmeric or curcumin. This is a potent anti-inflammatory. A lot of people use it for pain because of how much it relieves inflammation. It also goes pretty far in terms of protecting your brain tissue. If you were to consume enough in your diet to get the level of benefit that you would want here, you would be heavily putting turmeric on your food, and that probably wouldn't taste very good. L-theanine, that's the compound I talked about that's in green tea. This is fabulous in terms of short-term relief. You can take it when you're feeling a stressful event. You can take it when you're feeling anxious, and it can help relax you without any form of a non-drowsy relaxation, so it won't make you sleepy. Ashwagandha is also a great short-term. It's an adaptogen. It helps your body respond to stress appropriately. So it helps regulate your stress hormones. It'll reduce the inflammation, and it also just improves overall mood and well-being. So ashwagandha is not something you don't want to be on it long-term, but it is a fabulous thing to help boost you while you're getting the rest of your body to heal, while you're starting on some of these changes. And then something like lavender, passion flower, and chamomile in teas are great in terms of stress relief. You just have some tea with it, and it really helps to reduce stress and anxiety. So for supplement resources, these are actually things we have in-house. So for the fish oil, I do recommend Orthomega fish oil. We have the dosing here that goes along with it. Also vitamin D. Most Americans are not consuming enough vitamin D, and very many are either insufficient or deficient, especially since we live in New England. We do not make vitamin D from about October to April because of the angle of the sun. We can make it in the sunlight during the summertime, not in the winter, and getting it from food is pretty much impossible. There's not that many food sources that have it unless you're consuming fortified foods. So taking it as a supplement can be extremely powerful in terms of helping boost your mood. A magnesium supplement that we recommend is called Amino Mag. What it does is it is a form of magnesium that's bound to a protein, and that makes it way easier to absorb. It also makes it so that you don't get any gastrointestinal symptoms. Sometimes magnesium is used as a form of a laxative, and when it's bound to a protein like this, you don't get that side effect. Orthobiotic, which is the probiotic, we just recommend 1 capsule at bedtime. The tryptophan is just L-tryptophan, that's the amino acid. We have a curcumin supplement that is potent, and you can use it as you need it for stress, for anxiety, or you can also increase your dose if you have pain. It works excellent for that too. L-theanine, same thing, it's just L-theanine. And then ashwagandha. So we have all of these. They're actually over there on that table if anybody is curious about them, if you want to take a look, see what they're about. And then additionally, if you need help, saying that you're going to make changes is a lot easier than doing. That's something that we all experience. And sometimes working with a professional, someone to help you plan, guide, encourage, and increase accountability. So I'm not sure why that's going of its own accord, but we can help you with that. We offer personalized nutrition and wellness counseling. We can help you set goals. We can help you to realize what your goals might be and to help you reach them. We can help you track your progress over time. Sometimes it's hard to maintain perspective when you're looking at, okay, this is where I am now compared to where you've come from. We can provide you with personalized diet and lifestyle guidance that's very specific to you. Not everyone reacts to food the same way. Not everyone reacts to supplements the same way. Not everyone reacts to lifestyle the same way. And sometimes finding out what works for you best is incredibly important. We can also work with any health conditions you have and help you to manage them. We frequently work with people with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, anything like that. We can also help you assess hidden causes. Frequently, people don't even know why they feel the way they do. And that's something that we kind of specialize in. So in conclusion, chronic stress can greatly negatively impact your health. But through various positive changes that I discussed and support, you can give your body the tools it needs to manage and reduce stress. So for the next time, our talk will be on helping to support your sleep. Marty Donovan will be the one giving that talk. And that is the end. Does anybody have any questions? No? So either I confused you all or I did a fabulous job of explaining everything. All right. Sorry, go ahead.
Will the green tea keep you awake?
So 1 cup a day is enough. If it is